Hi, everyone. My name is Philip Leonardo Ocampo, and I'm one of the programming coordinators at Xpace Cultural Centre. Not there right now, but there in spirit. While everyone will be watching this, not today, because this is a pre-recorded talk. I'd just like to say Happy Easter if you're celebrating, aka this recording is happening on April 17th. And I can't think of a better way to spend today than in the lovely company of our three speakers, Ramolen Laruan, Sepideh Dashti, and Bianca Weeko Martin. Welcome to today's special artist talk. So for the uninitiated, this conversation is happening in conjunction with our current main space exhibition titled Double-Edged, which is on view at the gallery until this coming Saturday, April 23rd, alongside our other three spring exhibitions. Now, in favor of letting today's speakers do their thing, I won't get too in depth, but if you are interested in coming to see the actual exhibition with your own two eyes, seeing all the beautiful work, we'd love to see you there. I'm in my house right now, but I'm at Xpace all the time, so I'll be there too. And speaking of smoothest transition ever, speaking of being where we are, while we might be located in different spaces, with Xpace events, we usually begin with a land acknowledgement to give more context to the Indigenous land in which the gallery operates on, as well as to function as an understanding of the land and our relationship to it. As individual arts practitioners and cultural workers living and working within Takaranto, as well as the collective entity that constitutes Xpace. So this sacred land has been a site of human activity for 15,000 years. Serving as the home of Indigenous people and nations long before the colonial project. These are the original territories of the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations, and the Métis Nation. This territory exists in connection to the One Dish, One Spoon Wampum Belt, a peace treaty and mutual agreement established between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Confederacy of the Ojibwe and allied nations to care for the land and the precious resources around the Great Lakes. The dish, representing the land itself, and the spoon representing responsibility and sharing its resources, never taking more than you need and sharing with others. We must continue to uphold this treaty as both Indigenous folks and non-Indigenous / settler folks, as it addresses the entirety of our relations and relationships. And for us at Xpace, this treaty informs our intention to support artists who exist on the margins through public programming and the sharing of additional resources for arts practitioners, a sharing of knowledge, hospitality, and opportunity. Our fellow peers gathered across the vibrant arts community that has since developed here. And we stand in solidarity with Indigenous communities against the violent forces and effects of colonialism. So for us, it's really important to note that we want this land acknowledgement to function as a call to action as well. So, dismantling systemic racism and white supremacy within the institutions and systems that we exist in, as well as continuing to fight for Indigenous sovereignty, rights, and stewardship of land are just a few of the many ways in which support can take. We seek to use the resources available to us as an art space in order to work towards these goals within our projects and our programming. And as we see land acknowledgements rapidly become automated and co-opted by institutions, we recognize the inherent failure in the land acknowledgement itself. But despite these intrinsic failings, and still including it, Xpace wants to honor the land acknowledgement as something that is alive and living and ever shifting. So for us, it's unable to be completed, and it's instead an endless process of change as we always commit to be reflecting, responding, and learning about what it means to live and work on stolen land. And in regards to my own specific context, I am the son of immigrant parents who moved to Canada from the Philippines in 1989, so just 6 years before I was born in 1995. Cultivating new beginnings from the ground up in a new place means that my family and countless other immigrant families, and even more specifically, members of the Filipino diaspora, hold our new homes with a special kind of reverence. But despite this perceived ownership of land and the complexities of the immigrant experiences and conversations about displacement, that relationship is still rooted in colonial ideals. So this land is not and has never truly been ours. And, we're still settlers on this land. And instead, I think we're guests here. And I don't think that this is talked enough about in immigrant communities. I know I didn't realize this until much later in my life, and I don't ever really think that was made apparent to my parents until recently too. And I've been trying to unweave these embodied misunderstandings in an effort to better understand my place on this land. So who I am as a cultural worker, who I am as an artist, who I am as a human being, and we definitely encourage you all to think about your unique relationship to the land as well. So just a bit about Xpace. Founded in 2004, Xpace is an artist-run center located at the intersection of Lansdowne and Dundas, mandated towards supporting the professional development of emerging artists, designers, curators, writers, and other creatives in the city of Toronto. So you name it, support them. Among the ways in which Xpace does so include showing work by emerging arts practitioners across our 4 exhibition spaces, through which our entire programming year is selected through an annual open call for submissions. Our 2022 to 2023 open call is now live. So we invite you to take a look at that and submit if you have an idea. It's unthemed and doesn't cost anything to apply. And our definition of emerging is definitely very loose, just as long as you don't have extensive experience showing in like the AGO or like major institutions, Xpace is a space for you. If you just go to our opportunities page on the Xpace website, you can find more information on that. We also commission essays from emerging writers to accompany all of our exhibitions. We offer free workshops, events, and other public programming that range from really practical things like tenants' rights and tax workshops and grant writing for artists to really fun things like DJing or tarot card reading. So if you have an idea for a workshop or a skill that you'd like to share, we have an ongoing call for workshop submissions as well. So we encourage you to check that out too. And additionally, we commission posters for all of these workshops and events from emerging illustrators and graphic designers. So it's never too late or too early to get involved with us. And we do have a lot of really interesting ways in which we can support your work as an emerging artist. And we're interested in fighting against the perceived notion that artists do not need to be paid or are paid in exposure, meaning that Xpace commits to the equitable exchange for labor. So all opportunities with us are going to be paid. And we also have a Facebook group, and we're pretty active on social media, and we always share paid opportunities for artists to work or exhibit artwork, or for your Pay What You Can workshops in the city and beyond that span beyond what Xpace is doing. So we encourage you to get involved, check that out, and get acquainted with all the other great things that are happening in Toronto and beyond. My email address is philip@xpace.info if you have any questions. And honestly, I think that's all from me. I've spoken enough. From here on out, I think I'm just gonna go ahead and pin everyone speaking today and let Bianca, Sepideh, and Ramolen take the wheel.
Thanks, Philip. I'll chime in first, but that was probably one of the most inspiring and beautiful intros and land acknowledgements I've heard. So thank you for that this morning. So I'm Bianca Weeko Martin, and I'll make a quick introduction to myself before Ramolen and Sepideh go in depth about their work. I'll be the moderator for this artist talk, and I am a settler here with Filipino, Chinese Indonesian, and Javanese Indonesian ancestral roots. And I studied architecture and am currently in a curatorial role at the AGO, contrary and hopefully complementary to Xpace's amazing mandate. And I'm really excited to get more into the discussion after artists' presentations. So I'll hand it to Sepideh.
Hello, my name is Sepideh Dashti. I'm Canadian Iranian artist, emerging artist, and my art is interdisciplinary. Now I live in Memphis, and I go with sharing my PowerPoint. Good. Okay. So first I want to say thank you so much. I'm really humble and grateful for inviting me here. And I want to thank the people at Xpace who provided this opportunity for me. Especially thanks to Ramolen, Philip, and Natalie and Yasmin. They're not here, but thanks for all support and being really patient with me. And I want to thank you, Bianca, for moderating this conversation. So with this 50 minutes, I start with talking about the cartography of my body as embodiment, to map what I experience, perceive, represent, and what is really going on. In this mapping process, I take feminist perspective and consider body as a surface of event and a site of knowledge. Body, or the embodiment of the subject, is a key term in feminist struggle for the redefinition of subjectivity. It is to be understood as neither a biological nor a sociological category, but rather as a point of overlap between the physical, the symbolic, and the material social conditions. As a woman artist, I quote Simone de Beauvoir here, "I'm not born as a woman, but become a woman. I seek to repossess my sexuality and address issue of identity, identification, and subjectivity." So this work is some of my performing for videos from my undergrad studies until last year. I did some of them in my residency in Memphis, Tennessee. Immigration is a compelling subject to contemplate. Through my immigration, I gain privileges and benefits that stem from my daily experiences. Moving between cultures, languages, and different configurations of social relations, I have come closer to the possibility of achieving critical insight into my position within the current power relations I have experienced. Karen Kaplan, a professor of American Studies at the University of California, states, "We must leave home as it were, since our homes are often sites of racism, sexism, and other damaging social practices. Where we come to locate ourselves in terms of our specific histories and differences must be a place with room for what we can be salvaged from the past and what can be made new." I rethink identity construction by using my body, performing my body, and making objects relating to the body and experiences. Why performance art? In defense of performance art, Gomez Pena argues that the ultimate goal of performance is to decolonize our bodies, especially if we are from a minority group. And through this decolonization, we hope that the audience is inspired to do the same. This is my last live performance. I did it in my recent show at University of Virginia. So it took 1 hour. And I asked some people to send me some sentence about the things that are waiting for and the opportunities that they lost because of pandemic or anything. I read all those sentences and then cut part of the chador I wear and embroidering my hair on that fabric and left some knots. So it's kind of inspired by a ritual happens in my back home. So this ritual is women gather and kind of share some foods and talk about the things that they like about their problems, and then try to heal in this gathering and community. I put the process and the development of my creative practice in 3 categories. The first one calls Andarun, which is the inner space of home and normally identified as a feminized domestic space. Over and over, as a woman, I hear in a voice of tradition and religion that I could desire no greater destiny than to seek fulfillment as a wife and as a mother. Indeed, the iconic representation of women in contemporary era produced the function of reducing actual women politically and empirically to wives and mothers. The time and time I have asked myself the silent question, is this all? Working with the ideas of domesticity, identity formation, and the social and cultural construction of sexuality and gender inequality in private space, I intend to achieve into relevant issue. The way that social expectations, also political ideology, that assessing a domestic role for women restrict women from expressing and fulfilling their true identity. Highlighting my background, performing vulnerability, and experiencing anxiety work together in art to speak to the experience of oppression. This sense of vulnerability and anxiety is rooted in a way my sexuality and gender are intensively controlled by phallocentric culture. I emphasize on mimetic repetition of action of dominant codes and the codification of cultures women live in at the level of female identity, subjectivity, and differences. Talking about being a mother, I made a series focus more on the maternal body as it has come to figure the claim that stress on caring and responsibility and the idea of biological essentialism that historically grounded women's subordination. I posed my pregnant and then postpartum body shifts between being anxious and grotesque, also hopeful, as I consider it as a side of life. I explore paradoxes of my body and feeling. My breasted body as blurry, mushy, indefinite, multiple, and without clear identity. The body without organs define the social code and deliberately scrambles all the codes. Deleuze and Guattari invited us to make a body without organs, like see through your sinuses, see through your skin, and breathe with your belly. The next category is Biruni, which is the public space. Andarun is a classic term for the house in Iran. And as I said, it's a space for women and only only close male family member like father, brother, and husband can access to Andarun. In contrast, Biruni serves only for men of the household and their guests. I extend the term of Biruni to public spaces. This work is related to the position of female body and its experience in public space. The materiality of my hair is the main elements to address the many familiar contemporary issues relating to my body and self. The issues such as compulsory hijab, the restriction and intensive control over women's body, the limits on freedom of speech, and other power exerted directly upon the body relate to regimes, social, political, and economic oppression I have experienced. Veil as a piece of clothes has become an ongoing negotiation for the liberation of my feminine body. The process of unveiling, veiling, and reveiling have become complex question for me. Sometimes I lost where my particular experiences are from and where my practice can fit. And I think this is a time that the representation of this ambiguity is important and has the material effect to challenge this space of uncertainty. And finally, the representation become an individual expression. The work enacts self as a site of exchange for the materiality of my body with other objects. The presentation of self is understood not to be about the insufficiency of my femininity, but rather it is the enactment of the complexity exists inside the mechanism of patriarchy. And the last one is the in between, and this is the last thing I will talk about. So in between, for me, in between space is very about the question of how the cycle of violence from homeland comes to global context and affect me as an individual immigrant. I attempt to provide an examination of complex social, cultural, and political relations that have been included in the contemporary tension exist between my homeland and my host countries, both Canada and US. With considering my individuality and vulnerability of my body and connecting it to others. I borrowed the term counterpoint from Edward Said's for this video. Counterpoint is the state of living with corporeal vulnerability. It is the preservation of differences and the development of multiple narrative by complicating the binary position of victim and aggressor to provide the possibilities for empathy and solidarity. I represent the melancholic mood with this piece. According to Adam Zirek, a professor of theater studies in Berlin, melancholic mood serves as a resisting strategy against the totalitarian regimes. And I finish my presentation here. Thank you so much. And I give it to Ramolen.
Thank you, Sepideh. Wow. I want to just take a moment to think about what you've given us. Thank you for that. So I will share my screen. I wanted to begin with this work that I did on my second year of my MFA, and it's called As It Seems. So my work overall, I'm interested in the limitations of historical, social, as well as personal remembrances, and the impossibility of recovering history fully. So what does it mean to move forwards into possibilities with only traces, with only gaps and holes and fissures and cracks and stitches and glitches? So, I question knowledge making, the failings of objective knowledge as a way to resist colonial hegemonic tendency to generate knowledge about the colonized, or in general to make sense of what refuses to be understood. And it is through failure and changeability that I hope to preserve the idea of the unknowing, or at least always changing and in constant flux. And as it seems in this first piece, the denim trouser as a material is constructed to bring attention to the tear, the worn, the faded, incomplete, and stretch of a body in the diaspora. The physicality of tearing, the turning, the inside out for me is a way to pay attention to the details that are often lost or ignored. Destruction that leaves a slither of clue about the whole, and it becomes a destruction that is unraveling and undoing, which makes the structure already halfway built. This piece called As It Seems, Howardina, it's made from the fray of the previous work, As It Seems. So if the original work was already concerned with loss and what can we find in between and in the gaps of a whole, my practice is mostly concerned with found and existing materials. So I like to recycle works or to transform them over and over as an undoing and redoing in different ways. this image appears in the show again, for example. In here, I make these stitches patterns that I learned as a kid from the Philippines in school. And these were mending patterns for, if you break your clothing or has a hole in it or something, these are sort of the patterns that they teach you what to fix it. In the show, the image that's in the show, it's actually the images of the back side of these stitches. And it's lit from the back as well. So it's a retransport. I think of it as a retransformation, a different angled vision. So if I'm interested in what was lost or using what is left behind in the damage, in the detritus from the previous work, now the waste is no longer a junk in the margin, but an active agent shifting and shaping itself. This piece is called Loop. This was the installation at the Plum in Toronto. And this is an installation of it at Zaloki in Toronto as well. And Loop is another exploration of, in a way, just finding ways to rework what I already had. So rework the material that I had in different ways. So if the first one was made out of seams and the second one made out of fray, this is made out of waistbands and belt loops. So to me, pattern is a recurring form. It is something that is ongoing, that's an empirical evidence. And if it happens enough times, you can predict that it'll happen again. This pattern on loop and, goes for most of my work is that they're actually random and purposely manipulated to set up a situation in which I break expectations and rethink what we think are actually the same or what we think we're actually seeing. For loop, the color of the dye gets lighter and lighter. And if you see this in person, the spaces between the loops are actually not the same as well, because of course, these are different trousers coming from different people and they're different sizes. So these works are sort of what I had started, started in the beginning of COVID when I couldn't really make a lot of big installation works. That kind of really forced me to really see what I had and, make works that are find a little bit more smaller, a little bit more intimate, and really involved with my hand. Here, the fragments of my homeland, so I'm from the Philippines, penetrates through ordinary materials and force a disruption in acts of noticing and how we might understand the position of the things with regards to the other things within the larger work. And it's similar to this series over here called At a Distance, where familial objects are lodged all over in a denim composition to emphasize the dilemma of excavation work. So individual and historical excavations, especially diasporic histories, require construction from splintered histories. With written and remembered histories, the addition of fiction and imagined stories are entangled as a way to shatter a stable, dominant narrative. I'm also undermining my my role as an author, and I think as an artist who's supposed to tell you about my culture, about where I'm from, by adding fiction. This is so since coming to Canada, I've only been back to the Philippines once, and one of the works that I made is called From Here, which is a video installation of different scenes, everyday scenes of a still camera, where I translate the noise in the background so the background noise, but then, editing the video together, I've actually made prose poetry from the background noise, as well as mistranslations that I've added into the work. So it is not only translating what's behind or what's in the background, but it transforms. It is, at the moment, transforming itself with my own words, with the narrative that I'm intending for you to take on. In the fall of 2021, so a couple months ago, I did a residency in Barcelona. And, having been born in the Philippines, I was aware of the way that Spanish colonization has impacted my history. Yet, of course, living and, being in Spain magnified its influence. Being in Europe itself or in the colonizer's land, that it's a place that went elsewhere to extract, that it was not the land in which violence was enacted upon on, but everywhere I went, I recognized many things, which was odd in a place that I have never been to. It made me think of my relationship with Spain, or but more importantly, my relationship with the land here. I think while elsewhere, I realized that when I was a kid here, I think my inability to connect my family or my ancestors' history to Canada's history has proven an identity dilemma, where I didn't believe I didn't have any history at all. And that's the erasure of colonization, right? And that's the displacement. You are replaced and reconfigured in a world where you do not recognize anything around you. So being in Spain, I recognize like the street names, the store names, which is all really weird. But then you realize that because Filipino names were changed into Spanish names, and the people who are memorialized in Spain were memorialized because of their contribution to the colonial project. So in an act of reorientation, I wanted to poke at definitions of national landscape and collective identity, by literally taking to the streets and picking up whatever I found. And I gravitated towards these construction materials, bricks and concrete. To be fair, the studio was in Poblano, which is a neighborhood in Barcelona that is in the process of being gentrified. So there are a lot of structures being put up. But with these, structures or objects that build buildings or build homes, I paired them with ruined family photographs that I brought with me, and as well as books. So the page over here, books that I found in the market on and about the Philippines. In a way for me to highlight or force a connection or force a narrative with Spain and my own familial history. And this tension of, the structures being kind of like inside and outside is also really fascinating to me, as well as they look a bit like stained glass, which is a connection that I welcome. I just wanted to share a series that I'm currently working on. It's called A History of the World, and it's a collage series which I appropriate language of taxonomy and collecting practices. So I focus on repeated patterns to force unexpected relations. resembling these images open potential for activation and questioning methods of consumption and value, of legacies of collecting practices, of the image and object relation to memory, and the legitimization of historical knowledge. So really, I'm going into it with an aesthetic lens of all just these random images in photojournalism. Photojournalism, as you know, it has expectations that it's supposed to give us the full truth. And so I'm kind of playing on that with these collages. So that is a little bit about my work. And thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I feel like the same. I needed to take a moment to take in both your works, but thank you for not only sharing, like, you know, objectively like beautiful things, but also things that are so tied to your personal histories and like diasporic histories. And I know it takes a lot of labor and effort too. So yeah, thank you for sharing your processes. And so I think like one thing that I was struck by immediately when I was seeing the space with Philip was these architectural analogs between like a stitch, which was also alluded to being like related to archival failures, but between a stitch and I guess the act of building, which you, Ramolen, just touched on, like literally as well with even just collecting these bricks from Barcelona, which I thought was super interesting. But anyways, I think to me, those analogs manifested like in two ways: the grid, which Yasmin touched on in the essay, and then with textiles. So when I think about a grid in the architectural context, I think that it regularizes things in unproductive ways, but some might say that it does provide like stiffness or structure, rigidity. And so my question was, I guess, relating to the idea of building something from scratch versus appropriating or upending like an existing structure. And I think in my professional life, I contend with that when I'm working in an institution like a museum, for example, versus things that start more at a grassroots level. And I see the pros and cons of both, but I just wanted to get your opinion on the, yeah, like weighing out building from scratch versus from an existing structure.
You know, the grid has so much baggage in visual art as well, right? And immediately brings into mind white cis male modern artists, and the grid as an underlying logic in their work. And I think this is as only one system knowledge, and perhaps there are other different ways in which we can rethink and reconstruct it. So if you know our roads are grids, North America is partitioned in grids. We are in a white cube. A cube is a grid. It's basically a grid. So our physical space is structured in a grid. And I think you know, in how I use grid within my work, is I want to think of different ways to move away from it. So, you know, if we're moving away from the white cube, or we're trying to think outside of the box, trying to think without the box. So kind of unravel that pattern. Yeah.
Is it my turn?
Yeah, if you want.
Okay. I think in terms of grid, you know, like my background, you know, this geometric Islamic pattern. So I'm really associated with this geometric pattern and like this traditional pattern of doing embroidery, architecture, and like all these geometric pattern are very dominant in my culture from back home. But I think in terms of choosing grid, for me, is something universal and something that everybody familiar with it, and kind of try to break this exotic view on like geometric pattern that I am culturally associated with, if this answers your question.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, that on one hand we have the Western male like modernist grid, but then there's also like the more Eastern and spiritual grid in a way that is prone to being exoticized. So yeah, I guess that has to do with the next question I was going to ask. I was really intrigued by the different textiles that were present at the exhibition. And I also think of textiles as something that might have more like participatory processes that architecture can seek sometimes. So I think about embroidery, the way that different people can even like embroider within the same pattern, and also culturally specific textiles in the way we're thinking about like very particular grids as well. I appreciated the distinction between the keffiyeh in the Palestinian context and then in the Iranian Sepideh. And then I'm not sure if you want to speak about your relationship with like the fabric of a barong or a pinya, Ramolen, but to me textiles have been pretty present like in my own research in that way. And then thinking to the Indonesian side, like I guess batik in the way that's traveled from Indonesia to the rest of the Dutch colonies. So yeah, I don't know if that's really a question, but I appreciated the textiles and their potential for hybridity in the show as well. And I guess that the first stitches that you guys started with in the two pieces in the show, they also occurred on textiles and cloth.
So I started, I can say, textile first thinking about installation and soft sculpture, and kind of preparing something to wear and do performing for video, and then kind of this idea in my mind from my background that like the whole female family member back home, they do embroidery, they do sewing, they like some of them really depend to it to become independent as a woman in their daily life. And like when I was a child, like both my grandmothers, my mom, they really encouraged me to like learning embroidery. I don't know they were successful or not, but I said, okay, I want to like try it and continue this. And like I can say, before I experiment with some textile that really associate with my culture, there were like these traditional beautiful textiles, and then it's popped into my mind that okay, I'm create the patriarchy, the ideology, the political ideology back home that I still feel that it still control my body. Like if I want to go and visit the family back home, I still have to cover my hair, go back to that dress code. And I was looking for something that really can symbolize this ideology. And I find it kafiyeh or chafiyeh in Farsi, and find it like all these memories about like when I watched TV when I was a child, like the leader of Iran, he had this chafiyeh around his neck, and also sometimes like a moral police. When I was back home, they just asked me to cover my hair when I was cover completely my hair, because we always have to wear a scarf in the street in public. Most of them, they had this chafia, and I said, okay, this is the things I really want to deconstruct its meaning through my work. And also I had doubt because like at the beginning, they use this piece of clothes to show that they support Palestinian people. But at the same time, in the context of Iran, the meaning of it for me as an individual shift. So I kind of try to talk about it with different people like Yasmin about this. And then for the writing essay, when we talk about it, I felt that, okay, they understand it. This is not something that I, because Palestinian people use it as their resilience. And I really don't want to touch that. This is what my own experience. So I think think about this kind of fabric and textile to use in my work as a symbolic way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it also became kind of this conversation with you and Yasmin in this case. And I guess just you can't hold two truths, the textile in two different scenarios and completely different contexts at the same time. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, in my work, because I'm always, I think I'm looking and digging for things. The materials that I find are often, I would say, almost a coincidence. And so, the cotton which I stitch the denim fray in that work and in the gallery it's called Follow, and it's with the fray that's at the bottom kind of falling down. That's found material, that's cotton that I found. And I'm not like, even if I don't think I would be able to find like batik or like pinya barong, in the thrift store here, right? So I think it kind of just reflects the culture in which I am in right now. At the same time, my use of denim, I think that is both. It's that I really wanted to work with denim because it's a textile that is such a cultural signifier, which I guess kind of similar to Sepideh's cafe, and how it's different cultural signifier for different culture. But with denim, I think in America, in the 50s and 60s, it represented this rebelliousness and this individualism of American culture. However, in the Philippines, like I could never wear denim anywhere, and I think it kind of like stayed with me. And you couldn't go to church wearing jeans, you couldn't go to a gathering wearing jeans, and so I wanted to work with that. There's a little bit of idea of like respectability politics there too, but I think it's the fact that it's like somehow as a material it represents this very rebellious individualism of America that no one wanted in their culture. They didn't want to, no, you can't wear that because that represents that. So that's one of the reasons why I use that material in my work.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah, Philip and I were actually musing about the use of denim when we saw the installation Follow, and I really loved that that description of it. And yeah, I think that I feel like a bit apprehensive when when people just like pin like a barong, like piña or whatever to the Philippines in like a pretty reductive way. I don't think it's like always just about the natural material that was like available, but a lot of the times the embroidery, like the barong itself is the surface for the embroidery to be on, and like that is more reflective, I think, of like the flowers that are in the surrounding like region. And I've heard like really cool stories, like on another topic, I've heard really cool stories about how they were like slightly see-through, so revolutionaries could like hide their guns in, but that's like another like sort of folklore I've heard. But yeah, speaking of the installation that's in Xpace, I think I was also struck by the bleaching patterns or the dyeing patterns that were on the denim itself. And so it brought to my mind the term that you might have heard, pareidolia, which is the human ability to see shapes or make pictures out of randomness. So I really saw that in the installation, that could dream without a thought. And I think that's, you know, just a way of making faces out of clouds, like that type of phenomena. And so I guess I originally wanted to ask how that relates to both of your work, the installation and the photography, but I also think of pareidolia as something that kind of occurs in my friendships. Like I really tried to see like synchronicities and connections that can be made from people from like really disparate ancestral origins, but also, you know, friends I've made abroad who I just think like, I can't believe circumstances brought us to meet at this point. So I wanted you to like sort of speak about your friendship and how that led to this collaboration and ongoing collaborations, and how this came to be really through your friendship.
Do you wanna try, Sepideh?
Yeah. So Ramolen and I just had a chance to be together kind of a 1 year, right, Ramolen? And through this 1 year, so we had different creeds. We had, I think, 2 shows, right?
Yeah, so this
together.
was at Western. We met on during our MFA at Western.
Yeah. So I was really interested when, like her first work about, she used different fabrics, colorful fabrics, and a video. It was very interesting for me. It had a lot of information, and you know, I'm personally really interested in this kind of work that, like in its installation, it is kind of minimal, but thinking about it, your mind is boof. I really like this work, and Ramolen, she was the only one she did in her MFA. And also I really like when I saw she asked people to donate denim for creating work. It was, the ideas was very interesting, and say, okay, I really like it. I wasn't successful, Ramolen, because I asked people to donate their hair for my embroidery piece. But
oh my gosh, when I cut my hair, I will send you my hair.
Thank you. Yeah. I wasn't successful, you know. I wasn't successful, and some of the reaction was very interesting for me. So like, I think kind of the spark of the friendship start from, I was really interested in the like a process of creating artwork by Ramolen, and then we were kind of classmates, and we talk about everything, daily life, like MFA, everything. So, and then Ramolen suggested about like having proposal together, and then we both start to try make connection between our works. So kind of, it was very interesting process, right?
Yeah, I think that it's fascinating because you know, Sepideh and I, even though we don't come from the same homeland or even the same continent. And also we did not grow up in the same generation. And we are, yet there's so many connections happening still, right? Like, and I think we're trying to stay with those relations. Like, where do I, how can this person help and inform my work? How can their work inform my work? Yeah, and I think that's what my grad experience was all about. It's that who's around you, and what can you take from them? Like, Sepideh is so much information, and I'm just really happy to learn from her.
Thank you, Ramolen. Like, it just reminded me that we had one history class together, and English is my second language, and I moved to Canada in 2011, and like, it was the first time that I exposed to like a foreign language in official way, and I was bursting to cry and said, Ramolen, I cannot speak in a class. Sometimes I don't understand the conversations, and I feel I cannot pass this class. And she told me, Sepideh, go talk with the instructor. And I did it. And like, everything changed for me. So I wouldn't say like, sometimes in terms of friendship, I'm getting emotional. I really think about this. These are very important experiences for me. Like, and during your talk today, you talk about displacement. And this is right. Even for me, migration was voluntary, but still I feel displacement. And in terms of the generation, like, I'm a mom. I like my children, they born in Canada. So like, I feel sometimes even between my daily relationship, I feel this displacement, not just about the place, but relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, I don't know if I'm said this to Sepideh, but also, within classes, sometimes people don't know what you're talking about, even though they speak English. So, and I think we found a community and, in a way, belonging, and kind of just, talking about what we felt were similar, and a connection between us. So thank you for that. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, I always love to dig into like friendship and love, and it's really like beautiful to hear you describe those little connections, and sometimes they can't really be described, but it's great that you've had the opportunity to put on an art show together, which is like a really great form of and I think also like just the fact that migration and displacement are not monoliths. Like, you both had totally different experiences with it, and I'm sure Philip and I as well, whether generational or cultural. And I think like I often like revert to this, or not revert, but like cling on to the idea of an ancestral home when I think through those types of displacements. And I think both of you brought them up in different ways. Sepideh, I was really intrigued by like the concept of Andorun and Biruni in your art and in Iranian culture, I suppose, and how you sort of use them to describe like the domestic versus the public. In my own practice, I've researched my dad's ancestral house in Bulacan, even though it was really just a space that I visited during summers. And like, it is an exercise in like finding histories and even material culture through like the capital windows. But I think it's also like an exercise to me in like letting go in a way, because it's a house that's going to be sold. It's not like really part of my everyday life. And I feel like that's my way of grappling with like being a part of the diaspora. But yeah, I was just curious about your respective ancestral homes, if you want to describe them, whether that's like a childhood house or a place you visited, or really was the house you lived in before moving, before immigrating.
I think one of the things we really stick to is the form of a beauty in back home, like a beauty in your furniture, beauty in your costume, and beauty in like a culture. I brought a lot of these beautiful textile, traditional textile and dishes and everything with myself when I moved to Canada. I really associated with all those. And, you know, when, like, even when we visited family and came back, so we brought all these beautiful souvenir for friends and like a supervisor and like a people here. But I don't know, like one of the things that I start creating work that, okay, I know that there are some artists that really explore this notion of culture through these beautiful patterns and this kind of stuff. But I don't feel happy. Even I moved to Canada, I don't feel happy. And I said, okay, let's start to explore why I'm not happy, what I'm not satisfied. So I start to kind of think about how to deconstruct all these terms about the beautiful culture, about the what we really experience and what we show to the world, you know. And I know, like recently, if you follow me on Instagram, I'm sure not me, but some Iranian people, you can see that they are all stuck in the nostalgia of like their tradition, their culture, the beauty of these patterns. And like, but with my practice, I don't want to, I neglect it completely. I still consider it, but at the same time, I try to break this nostalgia because it doesn't let me to think critically about what really happened. Did I answer your question, Bianca?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Just honing in on the nostalgia and of course, like I'm romanticizing in a way, like those summers I would go home and it was actually so hot. Like, I don't even think I had a moment to like look at the house clearly because it was so hot. So I'm like doing it at a distance. But yeah, that's a really great point.
Yeah, you know, when I was in the Philippines, I was there since I was 10. So my idea of home is romanticized. It is from a view of a child, of childhood. And, you know, even then I was living in, you know, I moved in so many different places, and like different like islands, right? Because we have Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao. I've like lived in every single one as a child within 10 years, and then coming here, and yeah, home has, you know, I guess ancestral home is geographically located, but I think, as we know, home is moving, and it's really cliche, but it really is like in us. And it's, I think, the beauty of being in this situation where we are right now, where we are people who are able to remember it as well as move forward from it, is that, you know, we can like Sepideh take what we would like to take from it, and perhaps you know, set aside, or what are the things that we don't necessarily feel is good or healthy from home.
Yeah, I think it's a really fine balance too of like moving forward, but I guess honoring the actual ancestors who were behind the house and behind, I think like in those generations, like it would be a much closer process where you would be filling this house with like heirloom things. Like you weren't necessarily getting like a mass produced construction team to build your house. Like it really was a labor of love. And I also found many like synchronicities with family members who I necessarily wasn't like alive in the same generation as while doing that research. But yeah, it's always nice to talk about those romanticized houses sometimes.
I just want to add one point that like with immigration and my relationship to back home, I'm always homesick, and I started making a work. I showed in my presentation, like about this idea, like being in diaspora and I'm homesick. I love my family. I wanted to visit them. I were there for 26 years. You know, I grew up there, but at the same time, I want to say that, okay, I criticize the government and the government controlled borders. And I want to like say that my audiences think about why I did immigration and why sometimes like I think about exile, you know, if you create work that criticize the government of a somewhere, that they're dictatorship, they control borders, they arrest a lot of I'm not an activist, but they are recently, if you see, they have arrested a lot of activists. So kind of I don't know I'm successful or not, but kind of try to make my audiences think about this too. Yeah, that was the point.
Yeah, I think, well, another way the home kind of plays a role, like regardless of whether it's ancestral, is that it is the private sphere where you can like find refuge, or at least a place to discuss things that happen in like a more elite or government level within family or something like that. But yeah, and so with your work, Sepideh, like I guess I think you move into a lot of themes that are like abstract and grotesque and have a lot to do with like claiming agency over the body. And when I saw the video Zolf in the exhibition, I was really like mesmerized, and also, you know, I had the visceral feeling of like, ooh, like I can imagine that like happening in my own body, and it's like, it's so grotesque. And I think grotesque is like an interesting word because it kind of like in some circles has a negative tone, but I think it also is about like pushing boundaries of what is accepted societally. And so I liked in your presentation that you also brought the theme of like the maternal and motherhood into it, because that is so grotesque and abject, like something like it being expelled out of your body, but it's also a new life. So
yeah, I think with my practice, I kind of decide from my undergrad, I decide and learn to kind of use the feminist approach, kind of that this idea of embodiment, that your psyche is not separate from your body and they really relate to each other. and kind of thinking about how to resist the taboo of patriarchal culture relates to females' body, sexuality. Like at the beginning, I was really into this binary of female, male, and then gradually I kind of get to this point. There is a like kind of blur between this boundary of male, female, because because I think that all the bodies under the patriarchy are kind of in pain, you know, and so I kind of took this risk of creating abject body, grotesque body, to go to become kind of a metaphor for my female body. And I find it kind of both positive, powerful, from the female culture, you know. So I think it's kind of a strategy that I want that my viewer think about it, like, you know, there are a lot of beautiful Iranian painting that shows female very beautiful with these like a large beautiful eyes and lips, and they're mesmerizing, they're so beautiful. And I go, okay, I want to go against all this. And so I don't want to show my body exotic, and I want that people feel my flesh through this grotesque. Yeah, I think that's all.
Yeah, no, it's a really beautiful way to put it. And yeah, with the presence of the hair, like I really like that it's at the same time as it is as grotesque in like the different ways you use it. I mean, like, I guess like hair can be seen as like really beautiful and feminine, but then when you put it in different contexts, like inside the body or, you know, stitched within a fabric, it just changes how it's seen. And also it has like the political weight of being covered in Iran mostly. So
yeah, like I should say that in Iranian, in Persian literature and poet, there are a lot of poets about the beauty of long black hair. If they want to describe their lover, the beauty of a woman, they really pointed to the dark long hair. And I kind of start to experiment, okay, how about you go take a shower, or you're breastfeeding and you're losing a lot of hair, and then collect all those hair and make like, this is a Persian Iranian hair. And like in a male dominant context, they see it as something very precious and beautiful when you have long hair, long black hair. I know even in West it is something different, so they kind of like blonde hair maybe. I don't know. I kind of change the context and see what happened, if it makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And then I didn't immediately think of the grotesque like in when I saw your work, Ramolen, but then when you gave the presentation and you showed those first slides of the denim like being stretched almost like skin, I was like, ooh, like I didn't know denim could do that. And it does really remind me of like just, I don't know, skin being manipulated in a way.
That's I don't see it grotesque in my work as well, but it's kind of funny as I use trash and waste, but somehow I've never thought grotesque within my work.
Yeah, and then I also thought that it was nice to see the work as it seems, because that's actually in the show, as you said, but it's like printed in a like light box type of situation. So I was really pleased to see the original photos like that you had had in your presentation. And yeah, I guess to me, like, it made me think about more of translation, like whether that is cultural, but in that case, just scanning something that is like tactile and seeing it print on a new surface, because the light like made a gradient. It had like more of a graphic quality because it's been reproduced. So yeah, I guess like I encounter that when I like scan drawings. So I was wondering if that was the first time you had reproduced a photograph in that way, or if it's something you'll continue to do with your collages, for example.
Yeah, it was you know what, when I did the handkerchief, like the original work, I really wanted to present it in a way where you can see the front and the back, because I love the back and the way that the front is so neat and so patterned, and then at the back it does show it like that, but you see where the stitches are different a little bit more, and then you have these like fray long sides or short sides. I thought it was really interesting. I just really wanted to show the back, and I was trying to figure out how to also wanting to blow it up, because it's such a small piece. And what I remember Yasmin, when we're talking about the essay, she has mentioned how photography and pixels are grids as well. And I really, really like that connection with photography, or like, translating these I guess these physical objects into photographs, and it kind of going into that logic of the grid again almost, and then trying to take it out of that was really interesting. So yeah, that was my first time kind of doing that, but I've always been really interested in just transforming and retransforming the same work over and over again. So like, how do we see it in a different way? As for my collages, actually the last one that I gave, they're like 15 by 22, so they're not really big, but they're not small either. But I'm actually showing them as like huge decals, so they'll be blown up. I think it'd be really interesting to see how that relationship and size will, kind of change your relationship to the image.
Yeah, I like the point about the pixels also being a grid in itself. It's almost like it's a grid in a grid, because it's just two. And of course you're like always losing a little bit every time you scan something.
You scan, exactly. Yeah. And my practice or my background was in painting and in print. And I've always really enjoyed that about print, is that you can make an edition of 200, right? But if that edition of 200 is actually not probably going to be all exactly the same. And so you have these, ghost image, or you have these, reprinting and reprinting, but it's not exactly the same no matter how you try. And so repetition is broken. And that's so fascinating to me. Machine still kind of fails in that way.
Yeah, but I don't know, seeing the light box, I keep calling it the light box, but I know it has a name.
Yeah, we call it the DIY light box.
I love that.
You can't afford a real light box.
It's my favorite light box, but it definitely makes me think of like what even is the value of or why we usually like bestow more value to the original versus like
Yeah.
experiment that you get from repeating, because yeah, I think it's really cool the way it's mounted with the light.
Thank you. Thanks for Philip for helping me out with that installation.
Anytime, anytime.
Yeah, the deinstall will be much easier, I promise.
I guess we're nearing 2:30, so I had one last question for Sepideh, and then I kind of wanted to close with this quote by a writer I really like. But yeah, just Sepideh, like I think speaking to the photographs that you had in the show of like people's heads and the flowers, I was struck by, of course, the feminist themes that you've already gone into depth with, but there was one there was one subject who was male in the photograph, like he had sort of a balding head, and I was just curious about you know, like if that was significant, like the fact that it was a male subject in a room mostly of women.
Like the female head, my daughter, and the male one, my husband, they always help me with my art. They're really supportive. And kind of, I try to symbolize some political aspects of the ideology exists back home and control both male and female body, and kind of still exploring about the hair, the beauty, not beautiful, also funny, like you know, in the middle of the white tulip there are some hairball and the head is bald, so kind of put them together to kind of create this irony that somebody is bald and has a crown of hairball. So kind of working with this, and also about the titles kind of from Persian text, and these are kind of terms that they use, most of the time they use in literature and poetry. So gisu is a long female hair, black female hair, and with the male one is about kakol. Kakol is for, they use this term for male, and it's about the head in front of the male, in front, like the in front hair, sorry, for the male. So like in kind of a hairstyle, they make it grow and kind of style it. But you know, the bald hair, they don't have this kakol. So kind of playing with text. I mean, not text because it's a title. The title, the material, photography, and kind of these mediums.
Yeah, I really love that you draw a lot from poetry, but yeah, it makes me happy that there's like this additional layer that it's actually your family members. I didn't know that, and I guess you can feel like that they are intimate photographs, but that's really lovely.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I guess, I mean, I've learned a lot about both of your works through this, and it's really been great to speak. And I guess referencing my own like poet or writer, I've been reading a lot of Edward Glissant, who's a post-colonial writer from Martinique, and I think he writes a lot about identity that's always in relation to movement and in contact with other people. And I interpret it sort of as like the sorrow of losing parts of yourself while you're sharing and gaining new things. But yeah, I thought that this quote might have some meaning to this exhibition, which is really like a collaboration between two different people and coming from two different diasporic backgrounds. So we need to put an end to the idea of a border that defends and prevents, etc. Borders must be permeable. They must not be weapons against migration or immigration processes. But having said this, I think that borders are necessary in order to appreciate the passage from the flavor of one country to the flavor of another. Consequently, what we need today is not the abolition of borders, but to provide them with another meaning, passage, relation. And yeah, I thought that in like maybe in a way that's akin to taking a grid and dismantling that, I think borders function in a similar way. And yeah, that's all. But unless either of you have anything you want to end with.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say thank you for having us. Thanks, Philip. Thank you, Bianca, for this wonderful talk.
I want to say thank you too. Thank you, Bianca. Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Ramolen. This is great.
Well, pals, I'm so grateful to have shared this space with you, to have facilitated this conversation with you all, to have connected you all. Thank you for your time and your words and your thoughts and your amazing work. Yeah, Xpace appreciates it so much. And to those watching, whether or not you're folding laundry or cooking a dinner and listening to this, there is still time to see this exhibition. We are open until the 23rd, which is this coming Saturday. So don't miss this exhibition. It's so worth it. And I'm excited to see what everyone does from then there on.